EU CSRD, so the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, is the main development at the moment. It entered into force at the beginning of this year in 2023, and member states will be required to implement it by the middle of 2024. So what does CSRD do? Well, it's part of the EU Green Deal, and it aims to put sustainability reporting on an equal footing with financial reporting by making reliable and consistent data available to companies and investors. So it'll cover all sorts of things like strategy, the role of the board, targets, and what the company is doing across all of its sustainability agenda. And it also aims to look at double materiality, and that's a key, I suppose, thing that's different about CSRD in comparison to some of the other sustainability regimes that we're seeing come out internationally. So double materiality means that you have to look both at the impact that the company has looking out on the world around it, but also the impact of sustainability matters on the company itself. Well, the key difference really between CSRD and some of the voluntary regimes we've seen so far is that CSRD relies on mandatory reporting standards. So there's a lot of detail in them in terms of items that companies will need to report against following a materiality assessment. So the standards, there's 12 of them. 2 of them are cross-cutting, and then a number of them are topical. So they go to various aspects of environmental standards, social standards, and governance standards. And then in future, the EU Commission is also going to work on sectoral standards that are specific. And I suppose where this all comes together is that CSRD is going to be subject to audit, and so all of the detail provided will be gone through on a limited assurance basis by your auditor. So CSRD actually has a very wide scope. It will apply in phases to different types of companies, but primarily it will apply to large EU companies. So those are companies that fulfill 2 out of 3 conditions. Those are that they have an average of 250 employees or more. They have a balance sheet of 20 million and turnover of 40 million. And that applies either on a standalone or on a consolidated basis. So actually that's quite a significant cohort when compared with the types of sustainability reporting regimes that were in place before. It will also eventually apply to non-EU companies that have significant operations in the EU. That's a little bit further down the line. CSRD is going to apply on a phased basis for different types of companies. So for the companies in the first phase, that's companies that are already subject to the non-financial reporting directive. So that's EU public interest entities, like companies listed in the EU, also credit institutions and insurance undertakings. CSRD will apply to them for financial years starting after 1 January 2024, so reporting in 2025. Then the second phase will be large EU companies that didn't report during the first phase, and for them they'll be required to report on financial year starting after 1 January 2025, so reporting in 2026. Then a later phase will be listed SMEs in reporting in 2027, 2026 data, and then lastly the final phase will be non-EU companies. They will be reporting in 2029 on 2028 data. Well, the first thing to do is check that you're in scope. So it's a good idea to look at your organisation and check whether or not any of your subsidiaries or the organisation as a whole will come within scope of CSRD. And then look at what phase you might fall into based on that analysis. Then I think it's a good idea to look at what the company is already doing. So what voluntary standards are you already complying with? And then when comparing that with the standards that you'll be subject to under CSRD, try and identify any gaps and then any data that you might need to fill those gaps and whether or not they need to come from third parties, for instance, companies in your value chain. So once you've done that, I think the next key point is to be able to set up internal controls. CSRD, as we know, is going to be subject to audit, so it's very important that there are internal controls in place that will make sure that the data coming up through the organisation is robust and capable of verification. Luckily, there's a lot of help that we can provide here in Arthur Cox. We have a great ESG team that are standing ready to help.